First up, though, of course, we had a report into the post office scandal published yesterday. It is just volume 1, but it is looking into just the huge impact of the Horizon IT scandal. We found out that some 13 people at least took their own lives after being accused of wrongdoing based on evidence about the completely faulty Horizon IT system that both post office senior figures and developers at Fujitsu knew was very likely to be false. We know that dozens of other people contemplated or attempted suicide. Many hundreds more lost their families, lost their marriages, lost their homes, lives completely destroyed, suffering from alcoholism, depression, other mental health problems. Many, of course, even sent to prison completely wrongly. We also found out just how hard it is to blood from a stone doesn't do justice in terms of getting the compensation that people deserve. Well, let's talk about this right now with Katie Crane. She is the daughter of Bob Crane and Kathy Crane, who were both victims of the post office scandal. A very good morning to you, Katie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us. Just talk us through, just briefly, what happened to your parents, because it seems like to be a very typical case of just an outrageous injustice.
Yeah. So my mum and dad, they ran and owned a post office in Eastbourne. Everything was going really well. And then, long story short, the auditors came and told my mum that nearly £19,000 was missing. And essentially, she would have to pay that back out of her own money. The only reason she was able to do that is because my father's mum and dad had just passed. So it was taken from inheritance.
Yeah.
So obviously my nan and granddad. So she paid that back, but she was convicted at Lewis Crown Court and was given a 12-month community order. So she had to do community service.
Thankfully didn't go behind bars, but
exactly,
she could have.
No, absolutely. She very easily could have. And I know that still terrifies her now. And all I will say is that, I was listening to the report yesterday and my heart goes out to those families of those that were driven to suicide. It's absolutely appalling that that's happened. And, they must have felt so helpless and desperate to do that, that my heart breaks and I can't imagine what those families are going through. And I think you said earlier on, do they have blood on their hands? I think they absolutely do. There are people that have died. My father died since. He's unfortunately not alive to see any justice be done.
He died with that. I mean, he died with that stain on his reputation.
Exactly.
And that is such a, and I think that's the key thing. You can't get a job as a sub postmaster or sub postmistress without being of good character. You can't have criminal record. But you're dealing with people's money, their benefits. You're in a very important position of trust in local communities. You've got a reputation. You're known by everybody. Oh yes, let's go and see the cranes at the post office. And then suddenly you're a fraudster. You're stealing other people's money and then you're convicted. This has a devastating impact. What was the impact in terms of your family? I mean, obviously terrifying for your mother, but in terms of the impact, in terms of the shame, and I mean, we've talked to people who've had, people be abusive to their kids in the street and things. What happened to you, your family?
I mean, you're exactly right when you say my mum and dad have never done anything wrong in their lives before, and they worked very hard and everyone in the community knew them and respected them, and then all of a sudden that was completely taken away. Of course you had rumours, you had people talking in the street. My mum was obviously terrified for herself, but she was also worried about me and my sister. She was worried.
How old were you at the time when this all came to
I was really young, so I was only 11, so I was really young, so obviously just starting secondary school. I didn't want my friends to know because I didn't want them to think, oh gosh, had my mum done it, which of course we all knew she hadn't. But it is the shame and it's the worry. And I was terrified of my mum going to prison. She was my dad's main carer at the time. We know the correlation between mental health and physical health, and I know for a fact that this impacted on his health absolutely.
Of course, it's got to. And what about in terms of the impact in terms of family finances, which also matter? People have worked really hard to provide a safe family unit and a home for their children. Suddenly got a conviction for fraud, very difficult to get another job. What happened to the family home? And
I mean, obviously we were living in the post office, so we moved out of there because obviously we had no choice. We did get another property in Eastbourne, but obviously things were really tight for a long time. As you said, my mum was very fortunate that she got another job as a carer, but obviously every year it would come up on her DBS, so she was questioned. Thankfully, I have to say we're one of the lucky ones in terms of her work were very supportive, but it was just the constant shame, the constant worry. It's hanging over, it's hanging over her, and it still is now. Her conviction very thankfully was overturned over 12 months ago, but her case has still not been settled. She has still not had justice.
Yeah.
And I just think it's absolutely shocking. And as much as I welcome the recommendations from yesterday, how long is it going to take for them to be acted
Well,
on?
indeed. And the most extraordinary thing, I think, is although that when there was finally action after that drama, the ITV drama, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which, I mean, we'd already covered it on this show, and I know there were some other broadcasters who'd been campaigning on it. We had MPs and peers, and people were trying to, get this story sort of covered properly, and it was all going through a very slow process. But that drama really just brought it to reality, and everyone was saying, this is outrageous, it needs to be dealt with. And we had that extraordinary act of Parliament to basically, quash all those convictions, which was wonderful and the right thing to do. But do you not still think it's extraordinary that the last government, thought it was a good idea to allow the Post Office, the people who had wronged everybody? They weren't innocent. It's very clear. This inquiry yesterday made it very clear. Senior figures at the Post Office and at Fujitsu absolutely knew that these people were likely innocent, and they were allowing these people to go to prison. They were lying in court. They lied to Parliament. They lied again and again. They were covering it up. I mean, such an outrageous, a clear crime. But let's put them in charge. OK, a few names have changed, and a few, people's heads have rolled and people have moved on. But let's put the Post Office, that has proved itself to be utterly untrustworthy, in charge of the compensation scheme. No wonder it's like getting blood from a stone.
Exactly. I mean, it's ridiculous. I just don't understand at what point anybody thought that would be a good idea. I think, as you say, they've proven they're incapable of handling anything properly, and they should have nothing to do with it from now on. I totally think it's absolutely ridiculous. We've been waiting long enough. More people are dying. More people are still waiting for justice, and it's just not on. It's not fair.
And why is it so important to get that money, but also to get it as soon as possible? Explain what that impact would be.
I think because my mum's just turned 70, so she herself is very much saying, I feel like they're just waiting for me to die, is her words. And I've lost one parent before they saw justice. I'm not prepared to lose another. So that's why it's important. She should be enjoying her old years. She should be enjoying her retirement.
When she would have had a better pension, she would have had if she'd been able to keep her job and didn't have a fraud conviction.
Exactly. So that's why it's so important. It's that, she's a good, honest, hardworking woman, and she's had this over her head for so long now, as have me and my sister. And it's not fair. Enough's enough. Something's got to give. They've been proven time and time again that they were in the wrong. These people were innocent, and just let them get on with their lives now. It's not fair.
And that is the extraordinary thing. And when, just coming back to when, you were starting secondary school, this accusation was going on, you knew your parents were innocent. They knew they were innocent. Other people, were there people in the community, were there friends, were there family members who stood by and said, we know you? Because there were a few moments in that Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which, it was a fictionalised, it was fictional drama, but actually it was very, very accurate in terms of what actually really happened. But having someone say, I know you didn't do this. I know you didn't do this. Did you have anyone in your lives who did that?
Well, funnily enough, my mum actually didn't tell sort of many people. Her own mum and dad didn't actually know the truth of what had happened. So the family that did know,
how much shame there was.
Exactly, yes. We were lucky that the family that did know did stand by us, but there were people that she didn't want to worry with it, my mum. So there were people that didn't know. She did lose friends, people talk, people gossip, people don't know what to believe. And at the time, she was convicted. So they thought, oh, well, she must have done it. But we now know, of course, that she didn't. We always knew. But it was really tough. And I think even to this day, she's still very much in her shell with making new friends. I don't think she's not over it. And how can you be? It was completely traumatic for her. They need to now just do the right thing for once.
Get on with it. There should be an absolute thing. There's no reason why this stuff couldn't be done. I mean, it's not like there are millions of you. I mean, there are a lot of people involved. There is no reason why this can't all be dealt with in the next 2 months. If they really had a will. What would you say to the government, the Post Office Minister who's now in charge of this? What would you say to them today?
I think, as I said earlier on, just look at the damage that's been done. We can't change the past, but you can certainly make the future better and brighter for my mum and for everybody else that's been affected. I think, people might be bored of me talking about it by now, and I think that shows that actually the clock is ticking. More people are dying. People need to get on with their lives. And enough's enough, and I just hope they do the right thing. And I mean, the compensation process for my mum has been grueling. It's been arduous. It's not been easy, and I just don't understand how they can make it any harder. Like it's in black and white. She's innocent.
Yeah.
She needs to get what she deserves now.
Absolutely. Katie Crane, you are a fantastic advocate for your both of your parents, your mother and your father, daughter of the post office scandal victims, Bob and Kathy Crane. Thank you so much. I really hope that, I think we should demand that these families do get their justice. Thank you for joining us. Claire Pearsall, your response to this. You worked in the last government. Why would they avoid the post office in charge of dealing with compensation after the post office had lied for years?
Or marking their own homework and looking at... They shouldn't. They absolutely shouldn't. I don't know who's making decisions. We need people like Katie to come and tell them how to run the scheme like
I'd put
this.
Mr. Bates, Alan Bates, in charge of it. He seems to,
just a little bit of common sense tells
on this
you...
inquiry chair, he seems to be, I haven't got his name here, but he seems to be pretty darn solid on this, does he not? I mean, there's, they've got, this report has been very, Sir Win Williams, I'd put him in charge of it. He seems to know what he's doing.
Yeah, he does, but it's still not quick enough, is it? Those people are still waiting.
No.